Salve a tutti e benvenuti un altro episodio di Digital Download. Oops. Good afternoon, good morning, and good day wherever you may be joining us from, and welcome to a new edition of the Digital Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live, now globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio through ABGR, the world's #1 business talk news and strategy radio network. Today we're diving into the transformative power of kindness in both professional and personal lives with our special guest, Sarah Browning. As the founder of Time for Kindness and a seasoned communication professional, Sarah brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. Her work with organizations and businesses to foster a culture of kindness has made a significant impact. But before we bring Sarah on, let's go around the set and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, and have them join us? We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience, and the audience is highly encouraged. Tim, would you like to kick us off, please?
Yes, my name is Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, famous for writing the book Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. And welcome everybody, really excited about this. I love talking about kindness.
Excellent, thank you. Tracy.
Good morning, everyone. Tracy Borson, founder of TLB Coaching and Events, a proud partner of DLA Ignite. I'm all about authenticity and conversation and meaningful, impactful marketing. And so kindness is something I think is very rarely considered as part of the equation, but very often received as part of the equation. So I'm really excited to get into the conversation today.
Excellent, thank you, Tracy. Adam?
Ciao, mai bueno, amici. Whoops. Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite and Tim's business partner. And this is going to be a really interesting conversation, I think. I think in my time of being in the workplace, we've seen a big shift from purely measurable pounds, shillings and pence, dollars output kind of view to a more holistic view of employees' well-being and health, and happiness always seems to have taken a back seat in that. And we ask the question, are you happy at work? But actually, how do we get to be happy at work? How do we get to be happy? How do we show happiness and kindness and really make work and society an inclusive place? So if we have strategies for that, hopefully that's the outcome we'll get. So I'm really looking forward to this. So thank you, Bertrand.
Yes, we are looking forward to this conversation. Myself, Bertrand Godillot, I am the founder and managing partner of Odysseus & Co., a very proud DLA Ignite partner. So as I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Sarah Browning. Sarah's insight into the power of kindness will challenge your assumptions and inspire you to embrace a new approach to success. As she puts it, when you see the kindness in the world around you, you feel positive and hopeful. Let's bring her on.
Yay! Welcome, Sarah.
Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you.
Sarah, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what led you where you are today.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. And thank you. What an intro and really interesting to be here to have this conversation with you. And I can talk about kindness all day long. So you may well need to cut me off at some point. But yes, so I am a communications professional by profession, by training. I have worked for, easily half my life now in that field, and I have been working freelance as a communications consultant since 2010. I have worked a lot with not-for-profit organisations, charities, universities, local government, that kind of thing, and I'd always spoken about my clients as having a vision of a better world. And then I just 4 or 5 years ago now, I got to thinking, but what do you mean by that, Sarah? What is better? And it was at that point that I realized how kindness is really important to me. And more than that, though, that there is lots of kindness in the world already. We just don't talk about it enough yet. And when I had that realization, I thought, okay, fine. So what can I do about that? What do I bring to the party? And as a storyteller, that was kind of where I began. I thought, well, yeah, I can tell stories. I see kindness around me. I can tell these stories. I can share these real world examples. And the first year or so of the time, what has become Time for Kindness program, in all honesty, I was kind of playing at it. It was 2021. So I think, all bets were off, weren't they, for all of us at that point, and so on. But I spent the first year kind of sharing stories, and my then teenage daughter showed me how to use Instagram, and I put it on there and that kind of thing. And then actually I had somebody get in touch with me who said, I've seen what you're doing. It's absolutely amazing. He has mental health challenges, and he said, kindness of strangers has literally saved me. And actually, when you're in that dark place, you cannot see it for yourself. So having something to turn to is really helpful. And it was at that point that I thought, yeah, this is too serious for me not to, for me to carry on playing. I still share stories. I have. It's me and one other in my team. We share kindness stories, at least one every day, and we are not going to run out. I'm constantly looking for new ones, so it's great when people send in the stories. But that's one part of what we do. Another part is building a network of kindness ambassadors. So this is kind of volunteers who sign up to say, yes, I'm going to be part of your community. I will talk about kindness too, because I think one of the things is, this kindness is going on. And as I said, we don't talk about it enough. So we all need to get more comfortable. And that's where the conversations like this are fantastic, that we are comfortable. We are talking on a professional network, professional platform live about kindness is fantastic. And then the third part is that I now run workshops and I do talks to teach people the habits to notice what's there. Because what became apparent is that it comes fairly naturally to me, though not every day, I have to say. I guess the kind of the world context of what I'm doing, it does make it more challenging sometimes to see kindness, because that's not always what we hear about first, or very rarely what we hear about first. So running these workshops and so on to teach people those habits when it doesn't come naturally to them has proven to be really powerful. And I literally have people contacting me saying, this is changing my life, this is changing my worldview. I think what's really important to just make clear right at the start as well is I'm not about toxic positivity. So I'm not saying the bad stuff doesn't happen. Let's just look at the good. What I'm saying is we need more balance. Clearly, there's some awful stuff that goes on, but that's not the only story. That's not the only story of our world and ourselves within it. So, if we can have more balance, then it's better for all of us.
So
Excellent. And you've got friends in the audience, by the way.
Lovely, good.
So that, Tim likes the growth mindset with the yet. I agree. Okay. Sarah, let's start with a foundational question. Is kindness a sign of weakness in the business world?
No.
Well, that's pretty straightforward.
Right, we can all go home.
Absolutely.
I would love to what started that, because I know Adam kind of mentioned in his intro that there was this, I don't know if it was a focus on professionalism or what that made kindness seem like weakness. I don't know that as people receiving kindness, we've ever experienced that as weakness. So I'm curious, Sarah, if you have explored that in terms of what even led to that kind of narrative existing in the professional arena.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because like you say, when you experience it, it doesn't feel weak at all. And I think kindness definitely has a reputation problem, and I think some of it comes, a lot of it comes from confusing kind with nice. And actually, there's nothing wrong with being nice, but nice is a bit more of a kind of surface level sort of thing. And in terms of, I think, particularly in a business context, the idea of, so for example, you know, as a leader, a manager, if you've got to have difficult conversations with people, then actually being nice probably isn't helpful, because that often looks like avoiding the topic, avoiding the conversation. Whereas actually you can have difficult conversations with kindness, because it's about how you have that conversation and how you allow space for people to sort of process difficult things, or, you know, the empathy that you bring into those conversations. So I think some of where that kind of weakness and fluffiness comes in is that confusion and that lack of, I guess, understanding. Maybe it's lack of training, even in terms of, you know, when you become a leader, how often are you actually trained to have those kinds of conversations? Maybe at all. And if you are, then is kindness referenced in that kind of training that you receive? Probably not.
So you talk about kind of celebrating kindness, if you like, you know, and focusing on that. So is this kind of like the real-time equivalent of journaling? Because I hear that one of the things with journaling that you have to do, and I say I hear that because it's quite a difficult habit to build, is that at the end of each day, you write 3 things that are good that have happened today. And there might be, you know, major stuff, you know, I won a fantastic deal, or my best friend has found out that he's not ill after all. Or it could be that it's minor stuff, like, you know, I very successfully made a great latte in the morning before I went out. But also that you put some love back into the world. So you send a message to somebody saying, "Hi, Tim, I just wanted to say thank you very much for sharing that with me. I really enjoyed that and I appreciate it." Because actually we all love to hear nice stuff, and it makes someone else's day a bit better. So is that part of the same kind of mindset around this, or is this something different that you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess it's connected, isn't it? I think, yeah, much like you, I've never managed to sort of get into the discipline of journaling necessarily, but I think, you know, people I know who do it, I think often, as you've alluded to there, you know, the things that people are writing down probably are kind. You know, there is kindness in a lot of those kinds of things, and it certainly becomes a positive, virtuous circle, kind of upward spiral, because also what I'm finding through the work that I'm doing is that once you do start noticing kindness in the world, and it might be a very tiny thing, you know, it might be, as you say, you know, somebody smiling at a stranger in the street, or it could be a grand gesture, but there's a whole kind of range. Once you start noticing those things, and you whether you journal it and write it down or not, or if it's more of a sort of, you know, in your head or whatever, you notice more and more of them. And I think, you know, I'm not a driver myself, but people tell me, you know, if they are planning to buy a red car, for example, suddenly you see red cars everywhere, and it's a very similar thing. You know, once you start noticing it. In the workshops I run, we have some really interesting conversations around what is kindness, what's the definition, and also the kind of what counts as kindness, and the reality is there is no single definition of kindness. There are a lot of similarities in definitions, so they're positive, they have an impact on yourself or someone else. Kindness is active as well, something usually happens, but there's no single definition. But then also the bit about what counts is fascinating, because people will say to me, but that's just good manners, or I was just doing my job. And actually my own view is it doesn't have to be either or. It can be good manners and kindness. You can be doing your job and it's doing it in a kind way. And my own feeling, and I guess this taps back in, Adam, to the mindset piece, is that actually if we sort of recognize that kindness and seeing kindness and thinking of something in those terms makes us feel better and makes us feel more positive, then why don't we call something kindness anyway? Why kind of get into that slightly pedantic, oh, but it's just good manners? Actually, let's call it both. And then we get that positive feeling and that uplift and all the other stuff that comes from it.
Well, and I think that is interesting, because when you think about the concept of good manners, a lot of what manners are built on is kindness. Okay? There's also some things that manners are built on that are weird, but like a lot of them are, I mean, I'm Canadian, right? So let's frame that. And we open doors and we apologize for things when we bump into people. And like that for us is manners. And I think a lot of times it's like intricately connected to kindness as well. But I would love to like hear a little more, Sarah, from this concept of like, we talked about mindset and like kind of the awareness and how we're paying attention to things and how much of kindness is like your beingness versus the thing you do. Because if I use opening a door for someone as an example, right? Like that could be considered good manners. I can do that in a really angry way. And it may or may not be experienced by myself or someone else as kind. But like, I remember when I used to live in Vancouver, and there was this homeless gentleman who would open the door to the Shoppers Drug Mart for everybody who walked by. And it was just like such a exchange of kindness. And so I'd love to hear more about like the underlying beingness behind the doing, and what the relationship of that is with the experience of kindness.
Yeah, it's I think the whole one of the things that I think is really interesting is there is a growing body of kind of academic research around kindness as well, which is kind of demonstrating the positive impact it has. And I think oh, hang on. I was going to go off on my own tangent for a minute there, which, you know, so in terms of that kind of impact it has on people, I think that it can be, again, some of that comes from your own life experiences, like you say. And I think one of the things that, and certainly one of the things that comes up that we sort of talk about in terms of when I do talks and so on, is that sometimes noticing kindness can be a sort of easy first step or an easier first step into this kind of world of kindness, because clearly some people, you know, the experience of their life has meant that, you know, they're not able to show kindness or even to receive it, actually, sometimes because of, you know, things that have happened. But actually starting to notice what is going on around you in the world, it is a sort of first in to that. And I think also what's happened and what I've heard from people who follow the stories that I share and so on, there are, you know, examples of people saying, oh, I do that. I just hadn't thought about it as kindness. And again, I think there is something that's probably quite fundamental then in terms of kind of what you're doing, but the way you're thinking about it is different, and you've not kind of necessarily framed it in that way. But once people do start to frame it in that way, and again, I think, you know, we talked earlier about the weakness, the fluffiness side of it. Perhaps people are shying away, and I have no academic backup for this at all. There might be research out there, but you know, perhaps they're shying away from it because they're thinking, oh, it is weak, it is fluffy. I don't want to kind of label it that way or think of it that way, because I myself and maybe this is the kind of being and doing thing as well, is, you know, I don't think of myself as a weak person, or I don't want to be perceived as a weak person. And again, I think as we get older, somewhere along the way, we seem to lose that kind of belief in the strength of kindness. So I've done some interesting things. I've run community events and things like that. I've been community events where I've had more of opportunity to talk to kids about kindness, and I'll be there like building my wall of kindness, collecting stories, and I'll say, I remember one little girl in particular sticks in my mind. She's probably about 8, something like that, and I said, oh, I'm collecting stories of kind people, do you know any? And she said yes. I said, oh, who? Me. And there was no, and she was right, you know. The example she then gave was some sort of playground incident, something that had happened, and it would just really struck me and has stayed with me, that sort of ownership that she had of being kind. And in fact, why shouldn't she? Well, you know, it's a kindness is something which has this positive impact on the giver, the receiver, and the witness. so it's a fantastic thing. Why do we get embarrassed about it? And where have we learned that? And I guess to some extent the work I'm doing is unlearning that, or helping people to unlearn some of that.
Well, but potentially though, the thing with kindness is that it rarely gives an immediate payback. So, I'm going to be nice to you. That makes your day better. It means that you have a better evening, which means that you're happier tomorrow, which means you come into work and you enjoy yourself. And, this is a strategic shift in how the person that is the recipient and indeed the giver of the kindness, it's a strategic change and it has long-term benefits. However, solving problems is a tactical short-term thing. So we're often drawn from the long-term benefit back to the short-term benefit. Well, that's all very well, but you did this wrong and we need to address that. And, I haven't got time for that. And I haven't got time for your nonsense. You need to get on and do this. And I think a lot of it is about where you choose to focus your attention. And I remember watching, it was an illustration of exactly this, that you see the things that you focus on. So it was a video of somebody panning around a room. And the question was, can you count how many red things there are on the shelves in the room? So as the camera slowly pans around, you go, there's a vase and there's a typewriter and there's a radio and there's a book and okay, I got 17 or whatever it was. And so I'm better than you. I got 17. But the question then is, how many green things were there in the room? And the answer is, well, I've no idea because I wasn't looking for them.
Yeah.
And that's the point, isn't it? The point is that if you are looking at the glass being half empty, you can't see the water in the glass. And that's very dangerous for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And that fundamentally is where I've sort of Time for Kindness came from, really, was that concern that, and as part of when I was thinking about, well, all of that stuff I said at the beginning, I was thinking, well, what is the barrier? What is stopping kindness? And very often it is some kind of fear of the weakness side of things. But I think you're absolutely right. It is also people just, we're busy. We haven't considered it as something to put any focus on or to look out for, but it does become a positive thing that builds on itself once you start doing it. And I think what's interesting. So one of the stories that we had very early on sent into Time for Kindness was a story of a supermarket, a shopping mall rather. We don't call them malls here, do we? Shopping mall for you, Tracy. A shopping centre, and the doors, most of the doors were broken. There was only one set that were operational, and there was an older lady trying to come through with a little walker thing, and people were streaming in, and she couldn't get out. And then somebody, my friend, the person who sent in the story, did stop, and she did come out. And it would be really easy, and often a lot of people do focus on those that didn't stop. And then you get into that, well, of course, typical, no one stops these days. But someone did. And so if we choose to make, yeah, absolutely, it has to be, to start with, certainly a conscious choice, a conscious decision to switch our attention. But the more we practice it, the more it just becomes a habit that we notice that one person, and we are positive about that, and we build kind of from that base. But it does have to be, like I said, I think, if it doesn't come naturally to you, then there's a kind of conscious decision to start actively looking for those things, and they are there. There are so many examples out there. Once you start noticing, it's hard to stop.
We have a comment from Ali, and that will raise a question on my side. Is kindness is of intelligence, and intelligence is of humility. So I certainly can't agree more. But the question is, can kindness be taught? Or is it something that is just inherent?
Yeah, I think it's both. Can it be both? Is that a bit of a cop-out? I don't know. Yeah, I certainly think people can learn to. One of the things that I think is that we try to do with Time for Kindness and the stories that we share. As I say, we're not making any of them up. We're getting lots sent in. What we try to do is make sure that we have examples in lots of different areas and lots of different scenarios. So in workplaces, we get a lot coming from supermarkets, actually, public transport, friends, family. There's a real range. And what I don't focus on teaching people to be kind. That's not what I'm here to do. But I think it is a byproduct of the work that I do, because people, as I said earlier, there are people who are looking at it thinking, oh, I do that. I haven't thought about it as kindness. I will now. But there are also people who are thinking, oh, I could do that. I hadn't thought about that. That would be quite easy for me to replicate. So I think there's a definite potential for learning. And I think some of where that is coming from is when, a kind of a step before that is recognizing kind of what kindness is, why it matters, what difference it makes to you and the people around you. And then there's that sort of learning experience then to, we're all creative individuals at some level. We can all come up with ideas and ways of being kind. But if for some reason it's tricky for you at the moment, or you're just not that way inclined, then there are resources. And obviously I'd put a plug in for Time for Kindness there, but there are others as well, where you can go and just kind of teach yourself, well, what does that look like? What might I actually do in any given scenario if I wanted to be kind? So I think it's a bit of both, I think.
So
I think it's just,
how do you
Sorry, go
carve
ahead.
time out for this? Because an example that I try to be nice to people. That's what I try to do. So when I go to the supermarket and I get exceptional service from somebody, I ask to speak to the manager. And the manager always walks up with a long face, like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? Because they know what's going to happen. Someone's going to complain about the fact they've got no peaches or whatever it is. And I always say, Janice or Dave or whoever on the checkout, oh yes, yeah. I just want to say, absolutely amazing member of staff and a real credit to you. Thank you very much indeed. And you can see the complete change in their body language. However, I don't do that as much as I could, because invariably I'm running into the supermarket and running back out again. So how can we consciously carve time out to do this stuff? Because for me to say, oh, thanks, Tim, I really appreciate that. It's very kind of you to say that, takes longer than me saying, cheers, Tim. And there's a big difference between the two. Even though these are words that get used every day, there's a big difference between how those land. So how can we make the time for that?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, in your example, the first thing that comes into my head is, that's brilliant. Next time you do that, can you tell me so that I can put it on my Time for Kindness?
Of course.
Because I'm constantly, as I say, I'm not going to run out, but I constantly need a new source. There is something in there for me about. Yes, sometimes the kindness, the way to show the kindness is to get the manager to come out. And by the way, isn't it sad that, as you say, they come out with the expectation that it's going to be bad news? So I think just by doing that, you are helping to change the way that we operate in the world. There will be people who have seen you do that. Perhaps they're now waiting in the queue, that somewhere will think, oh, I might do that next time, or I could do that. So there's a learning thing. There is also, I think, that it doesn't always have to take that long. So another way of doing that would be actually to say to the person on the till as they're putting your stuff through, oh, thank you, this is really good service. So it doesn't every time have to take up more time.
Yeah.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there as well when you said about the kind of consciously carving out time, because it doesn't necessarily take longer to say the longer thing rather than just cheers, Tim. But what it does take is I'm consciously going to say it differently. And again, we are very trainable. So the more we practice, the more we do that. And yes, it will take longer to start with. Then, but once you kind of get into the habit, and it will just become second nature. I think the other thing which is huge for me in a lot of this is that we do have this idea that quicker is always better. and we are always so constantly trying to do stuff. And maybe this comes back to your point, Tracy, about the kind of being and doing and so on, that we do need to make choices about what is most important, either here in this instance or in our lives generally. Actually, what is more important is one of the reasons that I believe kindness is powerful is because it connects us as human beings. So even in those very little short interactions, there is a moment where we have that kind of human connection. And we have to get better at saying, yes, that is important. That is worth taking a bit more time. I know it's not possible all the time. And I know I'm very aware that, I come at this from a position of privilege as well. So, it's not always possible. But I think we do need to kind of have those discussions within ourselves, or maybe with each other, maybe both, but to kind of think about, well, what do we value here? It is about what we're noticing, but it is also about what are we valuing, and what is and we're all going to have a different answer to that. We're all going to have a different line where that comes. But again, I don't think that we very often take time to think about that. We're so in the moment of kind of running to stand still very often that we don't take that time to think about those things.
I'd love to share an example that's coming up for me, because we were with some friends at the swimming pool. And so yes, we're supervising children. So technically we're doing something, but my friend and I were just standing there chatting in the pool. And then this elderly lady was trying to get in, and she was clearly having a hard time and needed help if she was going to get in. And so my friend Megan walked over, and then another person joined her, and they helped this lady into the pool. And I was just standing there and I was thinking well, that's something I could do. But then also something that comes up for me is there's things that we see that we want to choose to contribute to. And there's also things that we see that maybe are not on our top set of things. So then me, and I don't know the proximity of that event to this next event, but we had this big windstorm, and I go for a walk in the morning, and almost all of the garbage bins were blown over. And I was well, I could just lift up the garbage bins as I walk by, right? It doesn't even take any more time. I'm here. And I remember thinking in my head, I don't even know that these are going to not blow over again. But this is something I can do that I feel is helpful for people. And it's helpful for people who don't have to do it themselves. It's helpful for the garbage pickup collectors, right? And even if only one of them stands up, then but it was just something I saw. And I think we also get caught up in our brains in what we should do from a kindness perspective, or what we're quote unquote supposed to do. Everybody's supposed to pick up the garbage. Everybody's supposed to help the elderly. Everybody's supposed to say thank you every time they get a really good customer experience. And the thing is that there's a lot of us. So if we were all doing the thing that we were drawn to do from a kindness perspective, then that's a lot of kindness. Yeah. And it's because you saw it. It's not because you were supposed to. And I always think, I think about that pool scenario quite often, because I was kindness got to exist in that scenario. And it wasn't actually my responsibility to be the one who offered the service, but I could notice the kindness. I can bring that back into my awareness of what am I seeing? How can I contribute to the kindness coming alive in the world? But that there's not one specific way that I'm supposed to do that in order to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, there are a lot of us. Because you're right, it's that kind of community connection kind of thing. We don't all have to do all the things.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is a balance. And again, this idea that it's not true that we are all either completely kind or completely unkind. Actually, we all have a bit of both in us, and it will depend on all sorts of factors, time that we have at that moment in time, other things we've got going on, kindness to ourselves. Actually, you might just not have wanted to go and help an elderly person, and that's okay, because she wasn't stuck on the side of the pool. You saw that somebody was being kind, or some people were being kind, and the end result was she got to do what she wanted to. So I think we need to try and avoid getting ourselves so tied up in our heads with it that, as you say, kind of nothing happens. And there is that, coming back to the conversation that sometimes comes up about what counts as kindness. One of the things that people will say to me is, these kind of social media influencers who are, filming themselves giving money to a homeless person or doing something like that. Is that really kindness? Does that count? And there is definitely a line somewhere. and for me, I think it's about the kind of intent and or cynicism that comes into it. And again, you're not helping that person into the pool, that there's not an intent to be unkind. It's just an observation of a situation. So yeah, I think we kind of need to give ourselves a bit of a break sometimes, because actually being kind to ourselves is also important. And sometimes actually the not doing something and giving yourself a bit of time, a bit of pause, that's important too. So yeah, I don't think I've come up with an answer particularly there, but
no, but I think what you were saying there is really important. So Bill Gates gives loads of money to charity. That's not necessarily a selfless job, because he gets a huge amount of personal pride and adoration for doing that. On the flip side of that, there are people like Keanu Reeves and the late George Michael that gave huge amounts of charity or huge amount of money to charity, and on the proviso that nobody would say that they had given the money. However, the fact remains that whether you like the taxation policies or not that have enabled people to get as rich as Bill Gates, the fact remains that it's better for him to give it to charity than not.
Yeah.
And I think that there's an element of this, isn't there, that I'm very kind to you. The only people that know about that are you and me, because it's a one-to-one thing. But if I'm kind to you in a public environment, then who knows how far that may travel. And it's better to be kind than it is to be nasty. And I know it's not binary, but there's kind and there's unkind. And actually, if every interaction we try to make kind, and if there's a win for me in the short term, great, but that shouldn't be my motivation for doing it. It should just be because I want to make the world a little bit better a place as a result of having taken that action. So I think that nice or kind or good is better than unkind or nasty and bad. And actually, that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, you said there about it, having a positive impact on yourself shouldn't be my motivation, or myself shouldn't be my motivation. But actually, why not? My view is, as long as it is a win-win and a genuine win-win situation, why shouldn't I do it? It's because I know I'll get something positive from it as well. Yeah. So again, we kind of tie ourselves up in knots, I think, don't we? But it is. The research shows that there is a positive impact on giver, receiver, and witness for kindness, that it's almost impossible for there not to be any kind of positive, even if the positive impact is just you feeling pleased with yourself because you did something, or feeling smug, or whatever it might be. And so, that's okay. I think it's, as long as you said, it's kind is better than unkind. So it's when there starts to be some damage that it becomes more of an issue. And again, that's not binary or black and white to see either.
No, but there's also the legacy, isn't there? So if we come back to the person working on the checkout at the supermarket again, and I say to your manager, I dealt with Sarah, she's absolutely fantastic. That's great. And maybe the manager says, well, she got another commendation, so she gets another £10 to spend in store on her shopping or whatever. It may be that I say it direct to you, and you feel pleased about the fact that you'd put a little bit of extra effort into our interaction. Maybe the people around hear that. But I think if you're nice in your interaction and I punish you for that, don't you dare speak to me, you're less likely to do it again. And that makes the world a worse place. If, however, I reward you for it, it maybe will make you do it again, or it maybe will just not be a disincentive to you doing it again. And I think a lot of this, you said at the beginning about how you want every interaction to be a kind one, and it's not there yet. And Kim commented on that, saying yet being the positive bit. And actually, if all of us are just mindful of this at every one of our interactions, can I say this in the way that makes me feel best, or can I say this in the way that makes us feel best? Actually, that's a pretty good viewpoint to go into things with, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually the yet bit for me is about kindness is already happening a lot, and we don't talk about it enough yet. And I think once we do, then we will get more into what you're saying there in terms of us all becoming more kind of aware of what is already happening, And I think that is another thing where people get a bit kind of reticent about it, a bit kind of held back because they think, oh, well, if I'm, all I'm hearing is negativity and so on. And in fact, a good sort of area that I think it illustrates this particularly is around leadership and the stories that we hear certainly at the moment. But I think more long term, this has always been the case. The leaders we hear about very often tend to be the kind of what I call the scary monster model of leadership. And therefore, anyone who is coming into leadership in particular, or who wants to lead in a different way, I worry that it becomes, it perpetuates itself because they look around and think, well, so how do I be a leader? How do I succeed as a leader? And if the stories they're hearing about and what they can see are those negative types, then either they're going to think, oh, well, that's how you do it. So I will have to push aside my natural affinity with being kind and treating people well. Or they will go, leadership not for me then. And we lose those people. Whereas there are lots of leaders, and I know this because I am going to be launching a campaign in a month or two where I'm going to share stories specifically of kind leaders, because I want to show those examples, show that they are there. And I am getting people sending examples in. I'm also getting people saying to me, oh, I can't think of any. I haven't worked for a kind leader. So don't get me wrong, again, there are plenty of leaders who are not doing it with kindness, but those examples are there, and we need to talk about them more to inspire others and to encourage others, I think, as well, because I'm even this, well, who knows with the scary monsters, but I mean, even the ones who aren't leading with kindness, it may well, they're not going to be uniformly unkind people. But there is a sort of narrative we have around how to lead that means that they think, okay, well, maybe they're kind in their private life and then they're different at work, and obviously that's a whole bigger question as well. But
I've met many leaders, Sarah, who were starting tough conversations with that really outstanding sentence: "It's not personal." Of course it is personal. And back to the comment you were making on cynicism, I think the question is really, and also back to what you were just saying, how can you create as a leader a culture of kindness in your organization? Is it, do you have in your practice examples of ways forward?
Yeah, well, so I said earlier about there's lots of academic research, and I think one of the academic things that had jumped out of me, I'm looking down because I have a cheat sheet of my studies written down because I can never remember them all in my head. But there was a study done by the Harvard Business Review that showed that leaders who express kindness found difficult conversations and providing uncomfortable feedback easier when they claim to have to do them. And it was to do with, they had built through kindness, they had built up positive relationships with their team that they then had to sort of have those difficult conversations with. So, I think that's a really useful example of why it matters and why it's worth doing. And I think, some of the kindness in terms of kind of creating that environment for your team, examples, I guess, are things like taking, it's a lot of what we've already talked about really in sort of taking into that leadership context. So taking the time to consciously think about what have my team been working on, giving them credit for the things that they have actually done, whether that it actually is an achievement of something that they have done or a recognition of actually something didn't go quite so well, but encouraging that kind of positive, open conversation, genuine positive, genuine open conversation. Like you said, Bertrand, it's not the it's not personal, when actually it is. In terms of the difficult side of things, and there's a blog on my website which is a really popular one, which is written by a leader who has led through a lot of change, so through restructures and those kinds of things. And they kind of explain in this blog the kinds of things they did. People still had to leave. People still, lost their jobs. But the way it was done was done in a much more kinder way than is perhaps always the experience. And again, a lot of that was about empathy. So it was about saying, knowing this isn't personal, but also recognizing that saying that is not helpful, and recognizing that it will feel personal. It is personal to that person who is thinking, how am I going to feed my children? Or what am I going to pay my mortgage, that kind of thing. It is personal to them. Therefore, saying it's not personal, whilst perhaps technically true, although there is the cynicism, it isn't always true. But even in a situation, where, while technically true, it is not kind to say that. And actually, what is kind is to often it's about time, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's the carving out some time to process what's happening. And I think some of this kind of ties back in then to my communications work as well, because it's around leaders often, and in a kind of restructure situation, leaders will often have spent quite a bit of time in those meetings where you've talked it all through, you've looked at the numbers, you've kind of probably planned different scenarios, all of that kind of stuff. And then you come out and go, this is the change. And actually your people then have not had that time to kind of process what's happening. Now, I'm not saying you should involve them necessarily in those kind of planning out scenarios that you've had to do as leaders. That is part of the responsibility of leadership. But what I am saying is thinking about, where can we factor in some time for them to process, rather than just kind of put it on them and then expect them to move on to the next stage straight away. So a lot of it is empathy. A lot of it is, and in my communications work, also my kindness work, I used to talk about putting yourself in your audience's shoes, and I have changed that, because it isn't about what would you think if you were them. It's about what is it like for them? What is the experience like in their, from their perspective? So, I think leaders again need to get more comfortable with that kind of thinking.
We've got a comment from Ali who says, you have to lead to be followed. Many tell the fireplace, give me heat and I'll give you wood, which is a nice comment. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Good analogy.
One of the things that... go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to... Sarah, so you have this... you do this thing where you collect kindness, where people can write in, can't they, about kindness?
Yes.
So
correct.
Tell us about that.
Correct. Yes. So I am always on the search for stories. As I say, I'm not going to run out of any. We are sharing at least one a day. So through our website, we have a share your story form on our website, where we just ask people to very simply say, what was the kindness that you witnessed, or you were involved in, or you received very often what people tell me about is kindness they have received rather than kindness they have given, which I think is fascinating, because I think, again, it's back to that sort of slightly embarrassed, don't want to show off kind of thing. But, let's own our kindness. And we just very simply ask people to, give us some details of kind of what went on. And if they have a photo to accompany it, that is also useful, because obviously we're putting it on social media. My poor family, anytime my daughter tells me anything vaguely that's kindness related, I will say to her, "Did you get a photograph?" But we don't have to have a photograph. But just examples, and like I've said long, I do run quite a broad sort of definition of kindness, and so really, if you experienced it or witnessed it as an example of kindness, I don't have a sort of checklist of whether it counts or not. I will use that. And again, the reason I'm doing that is so that we have this constant evolving series of kindness stories, so that I'm just showing people this is here, this is happening. And if you notice it, you will feel better. And if you feel better, and the reason I know people feel better is because they do come to me and say, really like what you're doing. It makes me feel positive. It makes me feel hopeful in a world that isn't always giving us that at the moment. And then when we feel better and we feel like that, we perform better, whatever that means, whether that's kind of an individual thing or for an organization, for a business, if you're performing better in that context. But
and where can we find this, Sarah?
So it's on my website, which is timeforkindness.co.uk. And we're also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, but the website gives you the links to all of that.
Sorry, Tracy.
I was just I'm in marketing, so I'm thinking about the conversation about the influencers. And one of the things that is interesting for me is that it's kind of two components, right? So there's the cynicism of why are you doing this? Are you doing this just for publicity? Versus the authenticity, which is I want to do this and I'm publicizing it because maybe someone else will do it too. And if two people are doing it, then that's better than one. And so it's just interesting for me, again, driving back to your why behind why you're doing that. If from a marketing perspective, people are watching this and trying to take away, okay, I'm going to be kind and this is how we're going to structure it into our marketing program. That's not, personally, I would say that doesn't count, because it's not what you would do. But if we can start to notice and then funnel that into what we would do. What does kindness look like for me? What does kindness look like for us? What does it feels different for all people, and all of these different things. And again, I think it also allows for those multi-dimensions of kindness, which is what's going to make kindness actually permeate in more areas, right? We don't need every single person at the swimming pool to help the lady into the pool, right? We don't, but we do need one to oh, that ball's kind of getting away from those kids, so I'm going to just toss it back to them, right? If we're tapped into that, this is what I would do, this is what kindness means to me, this is how I experience kindness, I think that is the secret to combat the cynicism around kindness. Because I do think when it feels authentic, people are more likely to interpret it as authentic anyway.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. I agree.
Excellent. Sarah, this has been really great. Thank you so much. Where can we find you? Where can we learn more?
Yes. So the website is timeforkindness.co.uk, and that has the links through to our social media. It has stories, it has blogs, all of that stuff. And I personally, Sarah Browning, I'm on LinkedIn. So come along and follow me there. I talk about a mixture of kindness and communication. It's all about connecting human beings. So I do enjoy connecting with people. So please do.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much. We now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get the show highlights, inside the behind the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. You may scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live/newsletter. On behalf of the panelists and to our guest, Sarah, and to our audience, thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oops.